Hey to everyone as they're coming in now. Justin, as I described as earlier, we kind of go through some community comments, and I'm gonna start out with my favorite part of the community comments. It's where we get to embarrass Vlad. See, he knows it's coming, right? So Justin, as you probably
I
know,
always
Vlad
forget
has
about it.
he actually does. He reacts like he forgets about it. But Justin, you probably know Vlad has a fairly popular YouTube channel, Solus PLC, who we're streaming to. Hey, Solus PLC. They have almost 25,000 subscribers, and the only thing this show and his channel is missing is a silver play button up above his right shoulder. So in the top left of that screen. And yeah, so we are on the race to the silver play button. So if you guys don't mind hitting subscribe to that and doing all the liking and other things, we're going to eventually get there.
Thanks, Dave.
There. Absolutely. So we are in the systems integration theme, and we want to thank our sponsor, Phoenix Contact. And I say this in the beginning because next week we've got a slightly different schedule. I'm going to go live from their facility. Vlad will be by his awesome wall of everything, up north of the border next week on Monday. So new show time and day on Monday. Watch out for that and the posts coming out as we figure out the time. And we are kind of sort of semi-professional podcasters, and I say that because I remember to do this once every 3 or so shows. So please like the show and like us on iTunes and Apple Podcasts and rate us 5 stars. Apparently that means something to someone within this strange algorithm that no one understands on podcasting and social media. So if you guys wouldn't mind giving us a like there, it helps raise up the charts, and you guys can go ahead and listen. We drop these episodes in podcast form every Thursday night around the point in time where Vlad is delirious and his eyes are bloodshot and he hits the launch button on the podcast app. Beyond that, we are live on Manufacturing Hub live, where you guys should go check out the new updated website. Thank you to Karim for doing that. Check out the new updated website and let us know your thoughts. Vlad, anything else before we jump in live?
No, I was just gonna say the website is pretty nice. It makes it easier for us to post updates as well. There's all the guests, all the sponsors, the bios, so that should all be pretty much up to date. If you want to, again, connect or reach out to any of the guests that speak on the show, because I know that we don't catch all the questions that come in through LinkedIn and or YouTube, so you can always find the people and connect with them later on. But no, Dave, that would be all on my side.
Awesome. No, perfect. So thank you everyone. Welcome to episode 35 of Manufacturing Hub with me, Dave, and this guy down here, Vlad. We are again in the systems integrator theme, and we have a very special guest. I think we always have special guests, but I think we've got one of the most interesting people to come on. Every time Justin Dean, our guest, and I talk, it's like peeling back layers of an onion. And if you guys saw the promo, you will see I mentioned, Justin working for NASA. I think I had spent 20 hours talking to Justin before he's like, "Oh yeah, I did this at NASA." This should be a very good conversation. And without further ado, Justin, welcome. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This should be good.
But no, really appreciate you joining, Justin. So as Dave alluded to, and I guess I haven't done an extensive research or haven't spoken to you about your background as much as he has. Could you give us maybe a little synopsis of what you've done and how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so I originally, when I was in school, I actually went to college. I studied art, which is like strange. Okay. And I took a design class. The guy taught it from an electronics perspective. I didn't know anything about electronics. And I was in his course for probably like a semester. Then after it, he was like, "Hey, I think you should switch to electrical engineering." And so next semester, actually he said, "You'll make more money." I heard more money. I switched. Didn't know anything about it pretty much. After I switched, pretty much every job I took while I was in school, because I was on an athletic scholarship, and I took around, not necessarily engineering roles specifically, but things that were going to help me after I got into the workforce essentially, right? So, yeah, I mean, pretty much I've spent the last probably, since 1999, 2000, in the everything from electrical engineering to automation to software development, pretty much anything technology, not just on the industrial side. So that's where I kind of, tell people all the time, like if they look at my resume, usually people think it's in like 3 or 4 different people's body, but it's just the situation of not turning down things, projects or whatever in the early days or whatever. So, and the fact that like, this may be good for listeners, wherever, and the fact that like in 2000, 2001, a company I worked for, their IT administrator knew kind of my background, and she was like, you should start going down the road of like all these IT certifications, like, like Microsoft and stuff like that, because one day the world you're in right now and the IT world will merge together. And so this was like, like pretty much like 20 years ago, right? So that's kind of what I kind of set out to do. So primarily spent a lot of my time in everything from oil and gas to manufacturing, water, wastewater. I mean, pretty much most industries, even the entertainment industry, developing some technologies there. So yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much kind of been around a lot of different stuff. Usually people, will contact me, ask me if I have heard of this platform or used this platform or something. 9 times out of 10, I probably have at least done a project with it. So would have some level of familiarity, I guess, with it. So yeah, pretty much everything, I would say, to a certain extent. Obviously not everything, but I can't really think of something off the top of my head, at the moment. So.
I think
go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say, I think Justin bucks the trend of jack of all trades, master of none. I think Justin like generally fits into jack of all trades, master of all.
I don't know about that, but
I was gonna ask you, how did you approach like learning these platforms, right? Because was it out of necessity for a specific project, or would you just like be curious enough to learn? Because I'm assuming you didn't learn all of them at the engineering school, right? After you've
right, yeah, true,
done a couple of jobs.
Yeah, so coming out of school, like I worked for an oil and gas services company, and primarily the role I was in, I was electronics engineer. So I split my time between doing pretty much like automation for test equipment that would go into manufacturing facilities internally inside the business. All as I said before, probably 6 of the 7 continents, wherever. So these machines are, while there's a lot of automation on these machines, they're very precise. So there's a lot of precision, a lot of calibration that has to be taken into account. So in that time frame, people were afraid to let PLCs do like full control, data acquisition all in one box. So a lot of people actually would have like a PLC for primarily like safety controls, right? And then they would use data acquisition systems to collect the data, right? Because you're looking at things in a very small window. So now, with all that being said, like a lot of the front end software was all custom software. So we weren't using like SCADA platforms or anything like that. Everything was basically either built in Visual Studio, like, 5 or 6, and then ultimately .NET around 2002. And so I sort of got exposed to actually what I would say, like when you look at like control systems, like the actual theory behind a control system, I got exposed to it from those perspectives, like actually in the workforce, right? So it wasn't so much about the hardware platforms or the software platforms, because to me, because of how I came up, those things didn't matter, at all. So now, when I went to work, when I interviewed to go to work at NASA, that's one thing they asked me. Well, what SCADA platforms have you worked with? And so So then it's like, obviously I'd worked with some, during that length of time, but the reality was like my approach was, well, we just build our own, right? In a lot of situations, in places I had worked before. So, and at the time, well, even that's still true today, NASA pretty much was all iconics, for the most part.
Okay.
So they were like, okay, well, if you've done stuff in C++ and Visual Basic and Cold Fusion, or I call Confusion, or whatever it is, platform, whatever, that, I mean, you can learn iconics, whatever.
Mhm.
So then, so it sort of was like this. I don't know if I would really call it by accident necessarily, but it definitely wasn't necessarily, hey, I set out to learn Allen Bradley, I set out to learn this or that or whatever. It's just those things, because I was being, at the time of, like the company I worked for initially right out of school was bad about selling a solution, buying all the hardware, shipping it, and then saying, go implement it. So you're in a situation where you're designing the system on site, you're developing the software on site, you're installing everything, you're commissioning the whole system, right? So you were thrown into situations where you were forced to have to adapt. So really, at the end of the day, you care less about the platforms and stuff of that nature. And that's just stuff that has stuck even to today, because to me today, obviously there's different platforms and there's different experiences within those platforms, but at the same time, a PLC is a PLC. You still have to go through the same steps to get from A to Z. And the same is true for SCADA platforms. Obviously there's benefits from, say, one platform to another one based on your infrastructure that you have, but that's just kind of the way I always approached it. So it's kind of a long answer, but
And along the way, I guess you made the call of starting your own systems integration company, right? And look for clients and kind of what was that process like, or what pushed you, I guess, to go that route?
Yeah, I mean, I really never set out to go into business for myself. It was a situation I had been told, like, you don't really fit it because of the skill set, right? So when someone would have me in their company, because I served in various roles from just a like regular engineer to like a director level position, was like, okay, well, you really don't like fit in a lot of situations. So how do you use someone that has a lot of different skills in a company that has an initiative that is a certain thing or whatever it is? So I was working for a company, and I think I was like the director of engineering and technology, and they got a project to build a facility. They really had sold it. I was the only one that really had the overall skill set, because at the end of the day, they were primarily a pump company that had acquired an automation side, and then I pretty much ran the automation side. So I was essentially running a business. I just didn't own it, essentially, right? My customer got to the point, he was like, hey, you either need to come work for me or you need to go start your own business. And so then I was like, well, I'm in the middle of your project. So I kind of just brushed it off, and then, because that was sort of the middle part of the year, like probably third to fourth quarter time frame of that particular year. And then the next January, I pretty much left that company and started Sahoma Controlware ultimately, and started that route. And also the good thing was I had someone that I was advising on from a technical perspective that sort of had an integration. I guess they're more like a project management company that their father had built out, and they had a project. And so I really didn't care about how much money I made off of the project. I really just cared as my business to get the experience as the business, because I already had the experience, right? But it was a matter of like doing that. And then like pretty much the business started growing pretty well. Just because, you know, I'd spent so long in an industry where I had, you know, like lots of contacts and stuff like that. So it's not like I'm working somewhere as an electrician and then all of a sudden decide to start an automation business where I have no contacts, you know. So I was able to convert those, you know, contacts essentially into, you know, projects and contracts and stuff like that. So
How did you, when you like started out, did you have maybe a certain aim or focus on what, platforms you were going to serve, or did you kind of work with your contacts and figure out what made sense for you? What was that process like of, getting the first, maybe, I don't know, 3 to 5 projects?
yeah, so the first, while I look at the first year or whatever. So yeah, I mean, I knew what the the products or the platforms that were pretty much in the market in the geographic region that I was in, right?
Hmm.
And then like Allen Bradley or SCADA Pack, whatever situation was. But then I learned ultimately. Now this is a little bit different situation, but I learned that like I had this relationship with distributors when I had worked in these other businesses for some time, right? And it was good relationships. But then I realized when I went on my own, even though you've known these people for probably 10 to 15 years, you're starting over
Right.
because your business is a nobody. They know who you are, but let's say someone like Rockwell. I mean, I don't want to pick on Rockwell, but I tried buying the toolkit for like 6 months. And then they's like, well, you have to spend X amount of money. And I already spent that amount of money. And so then I just decided early on, I started using my projects as the way to invest into the tools that I was going to need from the technology aspect. So I went out and bought like, all the programming software, all of that sort of stuff. But I used projects to fund that initially, right? So, and then
Wait, so did you stick to, sorry to interrupt, did you stick to Rockwell based on that experience, or did you switch tools and went?
No, I mean, obviously I knew what the market was, right?
Okay.
But I was not like stuck with Rockwell. I wasn't stuck with any manufacturer. So I always went into a situation project wise, looking at it from the perspective of like, what is the customer's infrastructure? So if someone, because this happened to us where basically we had a distributor that was a Siemens distributor and was trying to sell a paper manufacturer on Siemens. The guy that was going to buy the solution was all about Siemens. He knew Siemens and all this sort of stuff. So he was selling ideas like, okay, I just need you to go in there, because we need you to help us, deliver this solution. It was primarily going to be like a motion control, project or whatever. So it's okay. So I go in there, I meet with them. So this guy is talking about, I mean, it's Siemens everything. And so I'm thinking about like, okay, well, they must have a lot of Siemens. I go out to the manufacturing floor and it's nothing but control objects. And I'm like, well, Siemens doesn't make sense. I said, because you already have like this, say one machine they got from like China or something had like some Mitsubishi PLC on it or something. I was like, it doesn't make sense for you to go from one oddball control system to another one. Well, when your entire infrastructure is control objects. I mean, everything was control objects. They had the entire facility was everything Allen Bradley. So now the distributor, he respected my, thoughts on it. He didn't really, I guess, like it necessarily, but I'm like, and so that's when like he pretty much started realizing like I really didn't care well about the platform. It was really about what makes sense in that like situation for the customer. So that's kind of been the approach. Yeah.
That I mean, that definitely makes sense. I mean, I would say, it's unfortunate when you force the customer to switch because of your I guess like personal preference or knowledge. I think it should be more of the, like as you described, I guess you should be willing to learn the other platform. And at the end of the day, I think if you know Rockwell or Siemens, it shouldn't be that difficult to transition from one to the other, or even a different platform. I would say obviously it's becoming a little bit more of a learning curve with other higher level languages, especially if you don't have a background like yours, going, let's say, from ladder logic to programming something in C, for example, or .NET. But um, I think the customer should be obviously kind of leading that selection. But no, I mean, I think that's what a lot of, I'm sure, systems integrators face like early on. And how would you, I guess, if you were to give someone some advice starting off right now, like what are your thoughts on, establishing those first contracts? What maybe key relationships helped you get there as a systems integrator?
I would say probably even before that, I would like set up the business. I would set, like if someone's going out on their own, they're going to start their own business. Like I would set up their entire, I would work on, now obviously you can't set up your whole infrastructure before you start taking on clients, because maybe you need to start making money or whatever. But I would set it up in the fact that like the moment I start taking on clients, I'm just rolling them into my process. I'm not having to adapt my process because I went from a small customer to now, I'm a large customer, so, but as far as like establishing, relationships, I mean, I always approached, obviously the manufacturer is important and the distributor is important. So because before I started my first business, I seen where people primarily would just have the relationship with the distributor. And so that only gets them like so far, pretty much. And so I looked at it like, okay, if I have this relationship with the distributor, and I can build also a relationship with the manufacturer, like everyone can sort of like, come to a certain point to where, I add more value across both of those situations,
Okay.
so that was kind of my, thing. And then ultimately you're going to get led to the end customer, ultimately, I mean, at the end of the day. So
what are your thoughts? This question like came up when we spoke on the last episode with Dave. But what are your thoughts on learning, the different platforms? So you said obviously understanding the market, but I think there's also value, especially today, with some of the smaller, let's say, OEMs and different systems where you can go either, let's say, like Phoenix Contact, like BNR. You could learn, let's say, Code Assist, for example. What are your thoughts on, instead of going the traditional route, maybe picking a smaller, I guess, growing system, learning that platform, and then trying to land, projects through that avenue? Or you still think that maybe it's more advantageous, obviously, again, to specialize more on, let's say, Rockwell or Siemens, and then service certain clients with the other platforms?
yeah, I mean, I think like in industrial automation, people have to continue to learn something like pretty much on a daily basis. Maybe not daily, but pretty often you're always having to like learn something new, whether it is a different PLC or whatever. Because I personally feel like when you look at engineers, or you look at people that, like if you look at the automation engineer, like the automation engineer has to know a lot of different disciplines, pretty much. So they've got to know, some mechanical, some hydraulics, some pneumatics, obviously controls, some software, put into sort of concepts, wherever. So I think the skill set, because the skill set has to be pretty much so diverse, to a certain extent, that there's always this thing of having to learn different things. And then if you're in a learning state constantly, then when something new comes along, it's really not that big a deal to adapt to it, to learn it, and that sort of, even on projects you've never done before, because your mindset is in a situation of always learning something, right? So it's easier to adapt. But like I said, I mean, it, maybe not everyone is like that, but maybe everyone is, and they just don't know, you know?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Dave, what are your thoughts?
No, I think that Justin's point as to constantly having to learn is a very good point. And I would say if you look at Justin's very broad career path as an example, it's he's had to learn or had the opportunity foisted upon him to learn many things and has continued to succeed in those. And I would say that that's probably the most important skill set in this industry and probably every industry if you want to continue to stay at the top of your profession and continue to find opportunities, is be willing and interested to learn both on company time for projects and, because you're interested and you want to go, build a demo wall like you see behind you, Vlad. I know some part of that is, you want to learn new things. And so I think that that's very important. Going to the point of what you were saying about kind of setting up business processes, Justin, I know that you do some amount of mentorship, right? You help other people kind of grow and start their businesses. That was a very interesting theme that we talked about last episode. Would you mind kind of sharing as to how you have become either the unofficial or maybe more official mentor to many people in their businesses?
I just, well, obviously over time, going back a few years, obviously, people, like Zach Scriven and Walker Reynolds sort of got the exposure towards myself by throwing my name and everything, or not, I don't say everything, but in certain times or whatever. So obviously that got, some exposure. So, so by naturally people, inbox you about technical questions, say, hey, I'm going to start this business and like stuff like that. And I've been, so when I started like Sahoma, that like, it was like, I didn't have like a coach. I didn't have someone I was like, so everything was what I would consider learn the hard way. So obviously when you learn stuff the hard way, it's like being cemented in your head, right? So you kind of know what things don't work, what things have worked, and so on, and lessons learned. So I just always went down the road of just passing on like lessons learned and information that I, had gathered over the time. That worked for, obviously myself. And then I've spent the last 3 or 4 years just learning about other things. Because I do feel that if someone gets involved in a business, it does allow them to get involved into other things. If, assuming that that's what they want to do. I mean, eventually, I really didn't set out to do some of the other business stuff that I'm involved in, but it just sort of happened or whatever. But yeah, I spent a fair amount of time, helping people, just really just passing on my information and and so now like it's kind of turned into a business where we're doing like some marketing and some branding and some coaching, I guess, with another business partner. So yeah, I mean, I just look at it like sharing knowledge, really. So
I want to shift a little bit and talk about, some of the technologies that you see like coming up and get your maybe insights on where you see the manufacturing industry going, because I think there's this like somewhat of a shift, I would say, happening, and you can label it with many different words that we all know that are thrown around, but where do you think we're headed in the next, again, I want to say 5 years, but I think it's going to be more of a decade. Do you see like manufacturing automation like fundamentally changing, or you see just maybe more of the same with slight changes and improvements? What are your thoughts around that?
I think you'll drastically see a change in like the advancements that's starting to happen right now. There's a few people doing these things, right? Well, whether it's on the IoT side or if it's in the whole digital transformation or whatever side. I do see like automation sort of like continually to transform, and which means the job roles that sort of either support the automation task or just the manufacturing task are going to ultimately change. You know,
In what
so
way?
I mean, I think you're going to have more. I think you're going to probably have less operators, and you're going to have more people looking at like information, like trying to make decisions, because you're going to have, because obviously with COVID and everything that's happened, a lot of manufacturers probably felt like their business, because now I've got automation in my manufacturing plant, but I have also a bunch of people in the plant. And then when COVID shut down basically most of the world, it's like their business sort of like came to a screeching halt to a certain degree, right? So then in that situation, I think on the manufacturing side, they've learned that like they don't want to ever let those things happen again, right? So they need, their business has to continue to move on, even if like COVID happens again, or there's a whole different situation, which I'm sure there will be in the future. So I think by leveraging all of these different technologies, they're going to, you know, try to put themselves in positions to where they don't get, you know, like stopped or shut down, you know. And I think the ones that don't, pretty much, I mean, it like they may be around, they may not be around, but there's a high probability that those manufacturers will go away, or the integrators that approach things from that certain aspect will probably go away. And because you now have a new flavor of automation that's sort of taken you know, form. Because if you look at it, you have like a automation stack, and then you have a technology stack. They're essentially, those worlds are essentially merging together, right? So where the value of having guys that understand the full stack can also add value over here in the automation stack, and vice versa, probably to a certain extent. So I think that's what you're really going to see outside the sort of obvious trying to collect data and know where things are at within, you know, a few minutes or, you know, something like that. So as far as from a manufacturing aspect is.
So Justin, I was going to say, Justin, do you think that we're going to have less operators because it makes sense to automate some of those systems? Or do you think we're going to have less operators because it's very difficult to get and train and keep operators, and it's going to force many facilities to move away from as many manual tasks?
I don't think you're going to get rid of probably the number of people necessarily. I think their jobs are going to transform. Because like, if you look at like operator, they do tasks that essentially you could leverage like machine learning for.
Some of them,
to some of them, not everything, but there are certain things that could assist that individual. So now they know that guy or gal's job now changes a little bit, to where now they're being given options to like, hey, what do I want to do here, and so on. So they're still going to be, I think, involved in the process. I just think that the skill sets will have to change a little bit. You know,
so it's going to be less physical and I guess more decision making, as you were kind of alluding to.
I personally think I think there's going to be, now, how do you get there? Because you have individuals that are operator, you know, that like, because, you know, the traditional mindset of an operator is like, I want to hit this button. I understand just what my, you know, situation is here. I really don't know why I'm doing certain things. Some people do. I'm not saying they don't, but I think going forward is like, there will be a little bit different knowledge base as far as like that goes for the operators, or pretty much a lot of different positions throughout the enterprise, probably, because you're trying to connect everything essentially.
Absolutely.
Right? Because instead of you having to wait like an entire shift to know what happened, you will know now like in a few minutes. Right?
Absolutely.
So in order to make that happen, the job skill sets have to obviously change, will be because your systems have to change at the end of the day. So,
you know, this Dave, if you don't mind me throwing in, the next question. I'm like very curious on the thoughts, and there was an article, I think it was about Tesla last year, where they brought in so much automation into their facility, obviously for trying to automate some of the manual tasks, but because it required so much, I would say, like skilled personnel, which as of right now we're lacking in most US facilities. I'm
Right.
wondering if there's a risk where, again, because they see that the pandemic required them to adapt, like we bring in so much automation that it becomes increasingly difficult to keep operations at a certain point, and you see some kind of like a correction in these facilities. I'm wondering, like, if you see again, like similar risks that may occur, or you think that we can just kind of automate and it should be no problem whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, I think automating, in that like situation, I think you have to have a balance,
Hmm.
right? It's not like, hey, I want to implement so much automation that everybody has to be at this certain level just to be at the minimum, position or whatever, So I mean, I think that
So there's
that
maybe phases, right? Like, I
I
guess
think there
I
have
don't
to
know
be
what it looks like
phases
either. I'm
because
just.
you are, I would say, looking at over a decade where basically
Mm.
by, in tier probably 10 years from now, like the position would have been would have been a lot different, totally probably transformed. To what point, we probably don't know yet. But over, from now till then, those jobs will, probably slowly transform
Mhm.
by either, you know, these individuals being forced to learn a new task or new skill or wherever it is. And then by the time a decade sort of happens, where basically, now they have a completely different thing. The other thing people got to realize is, too, is the fact that like eventually the baby boomers are moving out, right?
Mhm.
So I mean, they're going to retire, they're going to die off. All of these things are actually going to happen, right? Um, so I mean, the robots are not going to not happen. So now it's like the other younger generation coming up is already has the analytical mindset. Like
Mhm.
even the ones people label as like not very smart. Like if you look at like people that are obsessed with like the Xbox and
Mhm.
in gaming, they're technical from the sense in that environment. So if I ask anybody that is heavy into that like situation, they can tell me all the ins and outs of everything,
Yep.
right? That's no different than an extremely good operator, like in an
Mhm.
oil and gas facility. So to me, companies should be, I guess, looking at the skill sets of this generation coming up and being like, okay, how can I leverage these individuals? Because ultimately, like, my other folks are going to go away at some point. So
Absolutely.
my knowledge base goes away, So I mean, I personally think that's where you'll see like people get forced into going into like mixed, where basically the SCADA system, it may change on how basically information is presented to the operator or whoever is in that role, you
Mhm.
know, based on who's coming up as well, right? So I mean, you might get into the mixed reality and all of that sort of stuff because those individuals are growing up in a time frame that they know so much from that perspective.
Dave, you had a question before I interrupted you earlier, but I completely agree with Justin. I think it's going to be very different, I guess, for the people coming up. Because again, I think we talked about this with some of our other guests. But at 2 years
Mhm.
old, you're pretty much holding a tablet in your hands, and
Yep.
some of the games, not to get into a lot of those details, but even Minecraft, I think, has a full simulator on circuits and the logic that you couldn't get out of like an electrical engineer, coming out of university sometimes. So
Mhm.
there's certain or a lot of pluses in many of those, I would say, like educational games too.
No, absolutely. And I was going to say, I agree with what Justin is saying. And I think that we've certainly seen a lot of that shift of technology away from every process as a manual process, right? So I've worked with customers in the past that, they make something, they have to heat treat the something, and then it has to get painted. Maybe it has to get quenched. Maybe it has to get serialized in their, our steps. And, in the past, it would be we put this thing together and, we weld the pieces together and then we put it in a pallet on a pallet. The pallet gets forked over to the furnace. And if it's a belt furnace, then there's a person that sits there and just loads it all day. And when they're done, another person comes and brings another pallet, and then it falls at the end, maybe into a quench tank, maybe on into another basket. And then another person comes with the fork to take it to the next step. And so we've certainly seen those go into more assembly line style processes where, the thing gets made and then it goes on the belt, and, the belt furnace takes it through the process and it quench and it comes up and it gets painted and serialized and all of those things. So I think to agree with what Justin was saying, we've certainly seen a shift towards that. And I think that we will continue to see the shift of being able to collect more data and turning those into, longer series of combined tasks, which will allow us to make more product with less physical labor in between every single one of those tasks. No, perfect. So I think this is a good time. So Justin, every time we get to talk about our sponsor, I get to go ahead and ask Vlad to give us his strange laugh, which is now our key for the sponsorship. So Vlad, can you give us the strange laugh and we'll talk about Phoenix Contact? See, isn't it so awkward, Justin? But no. So we're very happy to continue the sponsorship for the theme with Phoenix Contact. And we kind of have breaking news. They told us we could. Well, they didn't tell us we had to stop saying this, so we're going to continue to talk about it. So everyone knows the PLC Next, right? So it's been all over everywhere. Vlad will hold up his PLC Next starter kit, which is impossible to get. But they also have the PLC Next Edge Gateway. So the Edge Gateway is downloaded through the PLC Next app store onto the PLC Next, and it's a state-of-the-art IIoT and edge computing solution designed for data collection in the most demanding environments. Whether you have a small machine or an entire manufacturing floor, the PLC Next Edge Gateway leverages its advanced industrial design and programming openness to collect data from any device or sensor and send it directly to the cloud service of your choice. They say any data, any cloud. And so there are a bunch of advantages towards that, the data to the cloud, the IIoT, which is a little bit kind of where this conversation was going. No programming required, cybersecurity ready, compatible gateway CPU products and required accessories, compatible IO products, which is what Vlad was holding up, and compatible network and communication products. And we have a URL for you guys to take a look at. I don't think it's been posted anywhere that is not the show. And it would make Ira very happy if we go and broke the Phoenix Contact website. So if you guys want to go ahead and hammer that URL, the phoenixcontact.com/US-edge gateway. If you're listening and don't want to check the show notes, you guys can go ahead and do that. And so I think that this is very interesting, and it kind of alludes to what I think is the next part of the conversation. So Justin, you said at the beginning of your career, you were designing all of these systems and they had a PLC to kind of run the process. And that PLC was just for safety and control. And then there was another data acquisition system kind of living above that. What do you see in the future? Do you see, potentially having a bunch of IIoT style solutions where we have, be it Raspberry Pis, be it PLC Next, something like that, sitting there kind of collecting data and sending it somewhere? Or do you think that all of kind of this next generation of data solutions will be completely integrated into the PLCs that live on the plant floor?
Yeah, I think as time goes on, I think you're going down the road of less of all these different protocols.
Yep.
To kind of a standard a standard, protocol, like something like MQTT or something. It may be that, it may be something else that comes out later or whatever. But I do think the whole like publishing data will definitely be the standard into the future. This is why when I just talk to different companies, or like primarily like if it's been integrators, whatever, because I do work with like other integrators, other end customers, and that's essentially like, to me, like these things are going to change, right? So there, like you still have integrators that are stuck in like this whole industry, like 2.0, 3.0, like time frame. I don't say 2.0, but really 3.0, I guess. And so I think that with this whole like industry 4.0 whole concept of the implementation of like IoT and machine learning and like all of these different things that people are trying to do at the enterprise level anyway.
Yep.
Right. But it all starts around, where do you get the data from? Where do you point the data to? Yep. And so on. Right. So I think that you're going to have that the industry of industrial automation is going to shift to something similar to the actual software development industry.
Yeah.
Because they essentially function like what everyone's talking about. Everyone's talking about this whole unified namespace and all this other stuff. That industry has pretty much been doing some of those things like for quite a while. And I think that like even down to, open source, like open platforms. I mean, everything being open. I mean, like you're looking at, say, since it's your sponsor, so Phoenix Contact, for example, like we've used that same demo that he has in his office or whatever. So we had one in our little lab or whatever. And so I think that like, so if I look at something like a Phoenix Contact and you compare it to something, it don't matter who you compare it to. If you compare it to Siemens, Allen Bradley, whoever, the relation, if you look at Allen Bradley, like you're heavy relationship based in that like situation by either being forced to use their platform in a certain area or whatever. Now you're in a Phoenix Contact or something like that where it's an open platform pretty much, right? So now the relationship actually, as far as the hardware to the company, to the, if it's the distributor or whoever it is, really becomes, less important, because if you get mad at if customer A gets mad at whoever that's also on a CodeAssist platform and goes to Phoenix Contact, there's a lot that they can reuse. They're not having to now say, well, okay, well now I gotta now have a project where I have to have someone basically replicate, this platform over here, right? So I think, because of the evolution of CodeAssist and stuff like that, you're going to start to see where the hardware really becomes, I'll say, less important, overall, because you can go to a lot of the different places, probably not everywhere, obviously, but I mean, you have a lot of options as a customer now.
It's interesting that you mentioned that as an example. I've never thought about it, but the migration projects really are, I would say, challenging, right? Like even going from, let's say, like Rockwell to Siemens or vice versa, or to a different platform, it's a lot of engineering effort and ultimately dollars spent just to, because there is no tool that allows you to just like take this program, put it in the tool, and then it, spits out the other program on the other side. There's really no way to do it easily. So
let me ask you, Justin. So I would love to get to what you're describing, right? But I feel that that's like very utopian, right? That's almost like if we were to sit down today, that would be the utopia automation that we write about, in 20 years. What do you think that we need to do, as a community, or what needs to happen to get to the point where we could, in theory, swap out, hardware Or maybe we get into a supply chain issue like we're in now, and instead of having to rebuild something in a Siemens product that you can do or in a Rockwell product that you can find from the opposites, we can generally swap it in and keep it ready to go. What do you think would have to happen to get to that point?
I think that the people that really, so if you look at the customer, obviously the end customers is the people buying the solution,
Yep.
the people buying and owning ultimately the solutions. So it's more of along the lines of like educating them on that, right? And it's also about like not only educating them on that, but it's like presenting to them, how to sort of make them more efficient, right? Because like if you're talking about, because honestly, like if you're talking about someone right now that has like Siemens or Allen Bradley going to whether it's Wago, Phoenix Contact, whoever, it's obviously there's a transition path, right?
Yep.
And that may be a major project to do a conversion or something. So you're going to have that issue. I mean, regardless, of that situation. What I'm saying is if I have a platform that is already in Codesys, because we actually had this like situation, company wants it in, they're like, can we swap it out for this piece of hardware because it's available right now? And my other one, it went out, right? So is essentially, you can essentially do that because because Codesys is essentially like becoming a standard, just like MQTT is in the communication side. The other value in that open platform is the fact that like, if I do have to talk to these odd protocols or as it thinks it's odd, I'm not saying a Modbus or any of those things are odd, but in those situations that those things might be already available. So now you can take almost any Codesys driven PLC and communicate so many different protocols, right now. So you could do this transition in a different way than you probably would have done these things before.
What are your thoughts on, controls being migrated to the cloud? And the reason why I ask is I've had this conversation with a couple of people. I know that it's certainly a challenge, but everyone seems to talk about, I would say, like the value of data. But I'm still curious, are controls going to fundamentally change, or do you think, again, I think going from a PLC that runs like one software or the other isn't going to necessarily change how we do controls, right? Maybe the programming is different between, again, doing it in ladder logic on a Siemens or Rockwell versus like Codesys. Like, sure, it's going to open up some like different hardware, but if you go into the cloud, I think there's going to be very different opportunities. But obviously, with the challenges of your network, your latencies, and whatnot. What are your thoughts around there?
I don't know if you'll have like full control like in the cloud. Obviously, with the advances of Codesys, because Codesys, it can be a soft PLC, or there's other things out there that could essentially do that. You're still going to have hardware at some point. You have hardware like in the field essentially.
Well,
right?
it could be like point IO, right? That it's like hardware, but it's like
is
driven.
It going to be point IO or remote IO or something
Right.
like that? Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that would go to that extreme in recent time, I guess, maybe eventually. I mean, but I don't know that's a hard, like that would literally be a hard thing to sell a company on, like, hey, well, we're now going to control everything from AWS or Azure or something like that when people have a hard time accessing SharePoint. So I mean, that's kind of the way I would live. I mean, it's possible. I mean, but I mean, I don't know how reliable in the short term. Now, if you're looking out 20 years, 30 years, you really don't know what the potential becomes in that situation, So you can't really ever rule that out, I wouldn't say, but looking at where things are right now, it's kind of difficult to say that that would be something that happened in the next like 2 to 5 years or something like that for sure. You know.
I'm curious. I mean, like I could see again,
Yeah.
like there probably would have to be some like failovers and ways to kind of mitigate those risks. And I know like many, I mean, again, obviously it depends on the company, but there's many companies who have like several connections from different ISPs to maintain, it's like 99.99% percent uptime. And it seems that if the connectivity goes down, from like an internet standpoint, then there's bigger issues than just pure like controls. But again, I'm very curious to see if we're gonna see more of those applications, and I think it's gonna be slowly migrating, right? Like as you see more and more cloud solutions for data, then they're gonna slowly, and again, slowly might be like 5-10 years, but open up to doing some controls. It's gonna be probably non-critical applications first of all,
Right, it have to
and
be,
then.
yeah.
Huh?
I said, yeah, it would have to be. I mean, you still would have kind of a similar concept for high reliability or for like high availability or fault tolerant systems. That's where all of these different, other technologies will probably be leveraged a whole lot more than they already are, like Kubernetes and things like that, where you're able to do, some of those things. I mean, but like I said, I mean, it's, and like you were saying, I think maybe something phased in small things over time, because it would definitely be a hard thing to convince someone unless they're just
crazy,
insane, whatever, to do it like right now.
So
they probably would lose their job if they actually decided to do something like that.
I think that's a valid point, Justin. And so I'm going to make an ask, probably not to Justin, but to anyone listening. If you know someone who is working and or actively installing cloud only based or mostly cloud control systems, please reach out. Like we'd love to have a conversation with them and get them on the show. I think everyone would love to know about their experiences. We certainly have this conversation a lot. I think I am more on the Justin side of maybe in our lifetimes we see something like that, but in middle America, in most parts of the world, I don't think internet connectivity is good enough, if it exists, to consider running something along the lines of being willing to control applications without or just online.
And for what it's worth, to add to that, we would be looking for customers who would be willing to try such applications.
The three of us are going to go integrate the first cloud solution, and we'll have someone videotape the whole thing for the internet's posterity.
I mean, I can tell you that there's major like innovation hubs for many companies that are looking at such solutions. Like it might not be like full, cloud control, but certainly in non-critical applications, they are testing out, again, what's the uptime, what's the reliability, what are the benefits? Because I think, again, what maybe is the missing component, it's not just the cloud, right? But like even AWS and Azure have so many different tools that can be used to like optimize a process. And obviously, as Justin said, like it could be based purely on data, but I think even now we still like we collect the data and then we perform certain actions versus you could be optimizing a lot of these processes in real time. So it's for sure not going to be, I think, in the next few years, but there are companies looking into this, so it's interesting what they'll come up with.
No, I absolutely, I agree. I think that it makes sense for many companies to push their data into the cloud to be able to use all of the tools that exist on all of the cloud platforms. I find more companies than not don't have good, data visualization on what's going on within their process. And for many of them, the concept of talking about we're going to take a relatively unconnected facility and control everything from the internet is, I would literally watch people's brains melt out of their noses if we were to do that. So, but no, I think that is interesting. But if anyone is doing that or is working in one of these groups, as Vlad mentioned, who would be willing to kind of share their thoughts, what they're doing, maybe some conclusions, we would love to have that conversation. with those folks. But no, perfect. So a couple of questions for Justin as we have again reached the hour and have to wrap up. Justin, I like to joke that this is our hashtag not sponsored Audible ad, where I ask you what if you've got a couple of book recommendations, and Vlad goes and downloads it, and he'll listen to it as he sleeps to try to get it via osmosis. But do you have a book or book recommendation or two for us?
Yeah, I mean, I got a book that is called Rocket Fuel.
Okay.
It's kind of about kind of gets the guy kind of walks you through how to like kind of walk yourself forward in life, regardless of like setbacks or negativities or impact in your like situations or whatever. The guy goes by C-Rock. I can't pronounce his last name, but actually I have his book like right here. So I don't know if
Okay.
so,
I'm not gonna attempt to pronounce his last name, but we'll have a link to the book
right, yeah,
somewhere.
it's a pretty decent book. The guy sent me this book because he went live on Instagram and somehow I got pulled in and up on the live. So we had like a conversation. But yeah, it's a pretty decent book. I mean, there's other books. I mean, I guess right now I recently been reading a lot of books on primarily business or, like money or like stuff like that. Yeah.
Can you recommend anything in that domain also?
Yeah, I mean, there's, this is primarily the one. Well, I mean, this is kind of like you could relate it to kind of a business-ish book, because it's really for either people that want to be a high performer or people that are already high performers, like they're wanting to get to like what they may feel is what their potential is. Obviously, there's books out there if people are trying to sort of expand their, situation. Grant Cardone has like several books and stuff like that that are pretty decent or whatever. But I think, well, I guess what I noticed is there's not a whole lot of books on like automation, but like there's not a whole lot of books out there like on the technical side. So you're having to track this stuff down on Google and stuff like that. But that's there's another book I have that I've had for a long time that I'll read every once in a while called Slaying the Dragon. It's a book by a guy named Michael Johnson, who was a former, I guess, Olympic sprinter. It's a really good book about, like a drive and things of that nature. So, I mean, I think it's a very good book. So it's not a business book or nothing like that. But definitely people could relate maybe some of these things to business or their jobs or their life or whatever. So it's a pretty good book.
Who's it by, Justin? Sorry?
Michael Johnson.
Okay, I got you. I got it.
Yeah.
No, interesting. And then to that point, if anyone is looking for some automation books, former guest of the show and friend of the show, he's not in the comments at the moment, otherwise we'd embarrass him. Frank Lamb has written 3 or 4 books, much on the technical side, and he says he's working on his 4th or 5th, and he's claiming it's his last, Justin, book specifically devoted to troubleshooting. But anyone who watches Frank do everything he does, I'm not sure he'll ever be done writing and publishing books. But no, thank you. Those are 2 very interesting recommendations. We'll have to check them out. Thank you for that, Justin. And then last question from my side is, who should reach out to you?
Yeah, I mean, people, if there's situations, projects where I can add value, my situation can add value. Pretty much I work with other integrators, other end users, whether they're manufacturers, energy companies. Those are the kind of people that can reach out. Or on the other side, if there's people trying to launch their brand, they want to or they're getting ready to start a business. I have another business called Beauty and the Geek. So we started out as a podcast, but we've sort of turned into a digital marketing business. And I'm trying to take also these sort of industry 4.0 concepts into that space, because I feel like the business process side, like when you deal with like CRMs and like learning management systems and all these things that end up being in organizations, you could approach the data from the same standpoint. That's kind of what I'm trying to do there. Obviously, it's a little harder when people are just now starting out, but at least it gets people to start thinking about how they're going to handle their data when it comes into the organization, whether it's in the sales side of things or whatever. So yeah, that's pretty much that.
Oh, awesome. Thank you for that, Justin. I was going to make sure that we shouted out your podcast, Beauty and the Geek. I would say for most everything, Justin, you can find him. His hub is generally is LinkedIn, which you can find him, just about everywhere. On LinkedIn, you'll find Beauty and the Geek. You'll find Pioneer Engineering Design Consulting Controls Group, the company that Justin is working for. You can send him messages on LinkedIn if you're looking for that. But no, thank you, Justin. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you're looking for more shows, again, you can find the show at manufacturinghub.live. You can find Vlad at Solus PLC, and you can find me, again, both on LinkedIn and at dave-griffith.com. We are live almost every Wednesday, except next Wednesday, we will be live on Monday at Phoenix Contact. And then if you have made it this far and have not, given us a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button and given us ratings wherever you can, please go ahead, do so. Thank you to everyone, and thank you for our sponsors at Phoenix. Justin's got one more thing.
I got one more thing. We recently, for anyone that's out there on Clubhouse or anything like that, we've got a Industry 4.0 Digital Truth Room on Fridays around noon Central Time. Pretty much during most people's like lunch hour and stuff, but we'll discuss like different topics. We started last week. We'll probably just do it like once a week on Fridays. It's part of this other group called the Boss Mindset, which is primarily a business-driven room, but I decided to sort of create a room around, just pretty much around this whole Industry 4.0. I know there's other Industry 4.0 clubs and rooms on Clubhouse. This may capture a little bit different audience, maybe some people that are on LinkedIn that normally are in sort of the circle, or other people. So pretty much anyone can sort of come in to the conversation, because there's things probably people are curious on that, about what's going on in just technology that impacts sort of the whole Industry 4.0. So just thought I'd throw that out there.
Absolutely.
I spoke to Sean about that today, actually, Justin. I guess like my ask would be like, how do people find this link, or how do people, I guess, connect with you on Clubhouse? Is there some kind of an event that they can kind of register to, or
so we'll probably put something out. Like I thought he had put something out, but if not, I'll put something out for people to and I can get you guys a link and you guys can share it or whatever you want to do there.
Awesome.
To that room. It'll be a recurring room, but we have to schedule it every week or whatever it is, because Clubhouse doesn't have some sort of like just way, as far as my knowledge, on how to just do a auto scheduled room forever, or whatever. So, but yeah, that's that. I can get you guys that.
Awesome. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you to Justin again. Thank you to everyone else. We will have Clubhouse links everywhere that we can. And again, thank you to Phoenix Contact. As I was saying, we'll see everyone Monday.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thanks.